This was once the backyard of one of Gaza's biggest hospitals. Now it's become a cemetery. It contains thousands of unidentified bodies, and more are arriving. The bodies of unknown Palestinians are kept in a morgue until they can be processed. But without specialist equipment, their identities remain unknown.
Unfortunately, the Israeli occupation prevents the entry of the tools and devices that would help us to identify these dead. These devices require technicians and specialists with academic degrees and training who can operate and handle them. We can't do that ourselves.
Finally, any clothing found is checked to provide clues as to the identity of the victim. But the number of them is overwhelming a devastated healthcare system.
At the beginning of the war, we used to receive around 500 unidentified bodies. The Ministry of Health was forced to bury these unidentified bodies without documentation due to the extremely large numbers.
A lack of proper tools to identify dead bodies means their suffering continues as they can't find out what happened to their loved ones.
I'm the mother of missing Muhammad Nizar Abdul Razzaq. My first wish is to find him. I've tried everything, but I can't find him, and no one has been able to tell me anything about him. I've contacted organizations, cemeteries, but unfortunately I've not found my son yet.
These are the remains of a man found in Rashid Street on April the 26th. That is all these doctors are able to determine. They can't know for certain whether this is Muhammad or not. All they can say is where the body was found and when. Among the rubble, families search for the remains of their loved ones. Burned bodies with no faces and no names. Their memories are all they have of those they've lost. And without DNA testing, those killed here will remain unidentified. Ibrahim Khalili, Jazeera, Gaza City, Palestine.
Maha Hussaini is Strategy Director at EUROMED Human Rights Monitor. You're joining us from Gaza City. Thank you. Where are the unidentified remains kept at the moment, and what does it mean for present or future identification of the bodies if they're not kept in a morgue or in a controlled environment?
Hi, good morning. So as announced or said in the report, the issue of missing people is mainly linked to two main issues: the missing of these victims, and the other one, if they are found, they are unidentified because there are no DNA tests, and the tests that were previously done over victims are now unavailable because of Israel's blockade. There are no tests whatsoever currently being done or conducted across Gaza for victims. If there is a victim that is unidentified, it's the body is kept in the morgue for several days. If their families do not reach to this hospital or identify the victims, they are buried in unidentified or mass graves. The situation is devastating on so many levels for these families, particularly because these families do not even know whether their sons or their loved ones have been killed or they are still missing under the rubble. Thousands, we're talking about hundreds of Palestinians being killed every week across Gaza, and you can imagine the overwhelming need for this identification process to process this thing, because of we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Palestinians still even under the rubble, or thousands, tens of thousands. We're talking about around 11,000 Palestinians still missing. Yeah. We do not know, but we presume that they are dead under the rubble. When they are retrieved from under the rubble, most of them are decomposed, so their families cannot even identify whether these are their sons or their loved ones. Many of them are identified.
Maha, this is what I wanted to ask you about. Allow me to jump in here. Walk us through something that happens on an almost daily basis. There's no almost, on a daily basis in Gaza. A family member will disappear and the relatives will start looking for that family member and they don't find him or her. Then what happens? What are their options? What do they do?
Nothing happens at all. I know families who are still looking for their sons for around a year or even more. There are families who are still have hope that
But
they
I mean,
would
where do they
actually
go?
find
Can
their
they go
son.
to the different morgues?
Actually, they go to the morgues, they go to the hospitals, they sometimes open mass graves in search for their sons. But after all, they also sometimes go to the rubble where they expect that their sons were. For example, they start digging with their bare hands because you know the civil defense crews cannot actually assist in this process. There are priorities when there is bombing, etc. The civil crews actually only go to places where they presume that there are people still alive under the rubble. If they think that, or if a building is completely level to the ground or reduced to rubble, and they know or presume that there are people completely dead. The entire inhabitants of the building were killed. They do not even take the effort to go to this building because of the overwhelming number of bombardments and buildings targeted. So these families are left in limbo, complete limbo. They do not find anything. They just wait for the end of the war until they can actually rely on civil defense crews in removing the rubble, for example, looking for their sons, open up graves near the borders, for example, because there are tens of graves or dozens of graves near the border areas that Israel prevents residents from reaching these graves. So, as I said, there are
And
thousands of
Maha, you
families still
mentioned
living in the border.
something important earlier that was also mentioned by the medical personnel in Ibrahim's report, which is that when unidentified remains are at a hospital, at a morgue, in the hands of rescue teams, they could potentially be identified under some circumstances, provided the tools are there to do so, especially DNA testing kits, as I understand it. But nothing is entering the Gaza Strip. Those tools are not being allowed into the Strip. What possible reason could Israel have to prevent entry of those specific tools into Gaza?
Well, yes, the process is needed as urgently as possible because you know over time the evidence is vanishes over time, and Israel, I think this is part of the genocide that is conducted and that is carried out against Palestinians to lead to the destruction of the population without leaving any evidence. So Israel, since the beginning of this war, has been not only banning the entry of these DNA tools and kits and tests, but also preventing even the entry of bulldozers and heavy equipment to remove the rubble. Not only, we're not talking about the reconstruction of Gaza, we're talking about removing the rubble. 2 weeks ago, for example, Israel has bombed a group of bulldozers and heavy equipment used by the private sector to remove the rubble from neighborhoods, etc. So Israel wants to keep this situation. It wants to keep the situation going from bad to worse. It does not want any opportunity for the population to enhance or alleviate the suffering that is currently being carried out again or that is faced by them. So I think this is part of the engineered plan by Israel to keep the situation unlivable in Gaza and just to leave it from this bad situation to a worse crisis for the civilian population in Gaza in general.
Yeah, and it goes without saying, I'll just add this, that this makes accountability of any kind almost impossible. If you don't know how somebody was killed, much less who was killed or when or where,
Exactly.
you can't hold the killers, whoever they may be, to account. Maha Hussaini, thank you very much for joining us on the Al Jazeera NewsHour.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.